Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm 41 years old. There's something I have to admit. I'm completely addicted to German soap operas. Thanks to the endless options on various streaming services, I've been binging one drama after another, and honestly, I'm hooked. The characters, the twists, the passion, they never disappoint. Every episode is filled with intense emotions, betrayals, and cliffhangers that make it impossible to stop watching. But while I was absorbed in the drama on screen, little did I know that my real life was about to take a dramatic turn of its own. Let me take you back to almost 4 years ago. At that time, I was living with my husband, who was a bit older than me. We didn't have kids, but I had come to accept that. I thought it wouldn't be so bad to focus on us and spend some quality time together, just the two of us. Things seemed fine, or at least I thought they were until one day, everything started to unravel. It all began with a phone call from my best friend, Laura. Laura and I had known each other since we were kids. She had even been at my wedding, so we shared a long history. When I saw her name on my phone, I was excited to catch up, but her voice sounded different this time, quieter, more serious. Hey, Michelle. It's been a while. I just wanted to let you know I got divorced. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't seen it coming at all. Oh my gosh, Laura, I'm so sorry, I said, feeling a mix of surprise and sympathy. That must have been so hard for you. Let's hang out soon. We can grab some drinks and talk, okay? After we ended the call, I was still in shock. I felt bad for Laura, but I was also eager to share the news with my husband. As soon as I got home, I started to bring it up, but before I could say anything, my husband casually said, I know, Laura got divorced, right? I froze. How could he possibly know that? I hadn't told him yet. Confused, I asked, wait, how do you know she got divorced? I didn't mention it. He looked a little flustered, like he was caught off guard, and mumbled, oh, I must have overheard you talking about it or something. Something didn't feel right. I was sure I hadn't said anything to him about Laura's situation yet. But, trying not to overthink it, I went along with the conversation and added, well, yeah, she's divorced now. We're going to meet up for drinks, soon, just a girls' night out. To my surprise, my husband responded quickly, I'll come with you too. It'll be good for Laura to have both of us there to support her. I was baffled. Wait, you want to come? This is supposed to be a girls' night. I'm not sure why you'd want to come. He insisted, though, telling me to ask Laura if she'd be okay with him joining us. It was strange, but I reluctantly agreed and called Laura to tell her about it. Honestly, I expected her to say no after all. Who brings their husband to a girls' night out, especially when you're supposed to be comforting a friend? But to my surprise, Laura's response was, sure, that sounds great. Let's all have a drink together. Her enthusiasm threw me off. I had hoped she would suggest keeping it just between the two of us, but instead, she seemed more than happy for my husband to tag along. Suddenly, I found myself in a situation I hadn't expected, one that felt uncomfortable and confusing. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of the four of us going out together, especially considering this was supposed to be a chance for Laura and me to bond and for her to share what she was going through. But now it felt like I was being pulled into something I couldn't quite put my finger on. My husband's sudden interest in joining us and Laura's surprising agreement didn't sit well with me, but I couldn't explain why. In the end, we went out as planned, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. What started as a simple plan to catch up with my best friend turned into an evening that left me with more questions than answers. It was a night I'd rather not repeat. And just like the soap operas I love so much, the real drama in my life was just beginning. I was the only one who left that night feeling a little strange. Everything had seemed perfectly fine, though me, my husband, and Laura had all gathered for a night out together. To be honest, it was more fun than I expected. Laura mostly vented about her ex-husband, complaining about his bad behavior and lack of consideration during their marriage. We laughed, trying to lighten the mood and make her feel better. At one point, it felt like Laura had the whole room to herself, airing out her frustrations while my husband and I chipped in with jokes. It was nice to see Laura in a good mood, especially since she had just gone through a divorce. I was happy that we'd all come together that night to support her. For a while, it felt like old times, just friends having fun. But then, something happened that changed the tone of the evening for me. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom. I didn't think much of it until I came back and noticed something that made me pause before returning to the table. The way Laura and my husband were looking at each other, the way they were talking, it seemed too intimate. I couldn't put my finger on it, but their body language, the eye contact, it was unsettling. They hadn't seen each other in years, not since our wedding. So how did they become so close again just after a few drinks? For a moment, I felt like I was interrupting a date between two people who were just too comfortable with each other. My mind raced with doubts, but I pushed those thoughts aside and sat down. As soon as I took my seat, everything seemed to go back to normal. They acted like nothing had happened, as if the strange moment I'd witnessed was all in my head. I wondered if I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. It lingered, casting a shadow over the rest of the night. When it was time to leave, I decided to pay the bill, hoping to bring the evening to a close. Laura was very drunk by this point, and as I prepared to help her, my husband suddenly said, "I'll take her home." His nonchalant attitude caught me off guard. It wasn't, "Let's take her home," but, "I'll take her home." The casualness of it stung a little. I blinked, confused. "Wait, why you? I'm your wife, and I'm not as drunk as she is. We should take her together." But he brushed me off. "She's living alone now, and she's wobbling. It's too late for her to go home alone. You take a cab and go home yourself." Something didn't sit right. "If you put her in a cab, she'll go straight to her apartment." "What's the problem?" He shook his head. "I'm worried she won't make it to her apartment on her own." I froze. How did he know Laura was living alone now? Did she tell him while I was in the bathroom? It was possible, but that small detail only made my discomfort grow into full-blown suspicion. The pieces didn't fit. But instead of pushing back, I said quietly, "Fine. I'll go home myself then." With that, I left the restaurant, leaving my husband and Laura together. It wasn't what I wanted to leave her alone with my husband, but something else occurred to me. Going home alone gave me the chance to dig into whatever was happening between them. The air felt thick with something unsaid, something I needed to figure out. As soon as I got home, I knew where to start. My husband had a private study in the house's space he kept to himself. It wasn't a bedroom, but a personal sanctuary filled with his books, papers, and work. And maybe, just maybe, it held the answers I needed. I stepped into his study with my heart pounding, feeling the weight of my suspicions. I wasn't sure what I would find, but at that moment, I realized I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Whatever was going on between Laura and my husband, it was time to find out the truth. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I thought about going to Laura's place to confront her directly, but that seemed too harsh. The idea of searching for answers in my own home felt both right and incredibly insulting at the same time. With this conflict in my mind, I started looking through my husband's study, scanning the shelves for anything out of place. That's when I found a simple photo album tucked away, something I didn't remember ever seeing before. My heart pounded with dread as I reached for it, knowing deep down that whatever was inside, I probably didn't want to see. With shaky hands, I flipped through the pages, and instantly, I wished I hadn't. The album was full of pictures of my husband and Laura, smiling together, looking far too happy. As I flipped through more pages, it became clear. They had been meeting secretly for years. Judging by Laura's different hairstyles and my husband's clothes, this affair had been going on almost since the beginning of my marriage. Over 7 years, they had been seeing each other behind my back. The weight of it hit me like a tidal wave. I felt sick. My stomach churned, combining my drunkenness with the disgust and betrayal flooding through me. I rushed to the bathroom, barely holding back the urge to vomit. Just as I leaned over the sink, I heard the front door open. My husband had come home. "Oh, you threw up? You drank too much, didn't you?" he said casually, as if nothing was wrong, gently rubbing my back. "Don't touch me," I snapped, shoving him away and slapping his hand. "Don't even touch me." He looked confused and tried to act calm. "Hey, it's me. Hold on, I'll get you some water." He thought I was just drunk, too far gone to know what was happening. But I wasn't. I was very aware, and I hated him. I wanted to drink enough to forget, to make the pain disappear, but that wasn't an option. Go sit in the living room, I managed to say. We need to talk. He paused, then asked, What's wrong with you? You're in a bad mood because I dropped Laura off? Seriously? He tried to make light of it, almost like he was joking, but his attempt at humor made me sick. I took a deep breath and gathered my thoughts. I wasn't going to play games. Let me ask you something, I said, walking into the living room with the photo album in hand. I held it up, showing him the cover. His face immediately went pale. First question, I continued, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. What does this picture show? He didn't answer, his silence telling me everything I already knew. Second question, I pressed. This is a yes or no question. Is there any wife in the world who could look at this photo and be okay with it? Again, silence. I took a step closer, my anger rising. Third question, how do you think I feel right now? Go ahead, give me your answer. He stood there, speechless, refusing to look me in the eyes. The quiet was unbearable, making me even angrier. Why don't you say something instead of just standing there? I spat, my voice shaking with rage. Stop acting like this is my fault. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed and spoke. Okay, I cheated. I'm really stupid. I'm sorry. His apology felt hollow, empty, like he was only saying it because he had been caught. There was no real emotion behind it, no regret. If he had broken down, cried, and begged for forgiveness, I might have felt better. But the way he was so calm and detached made me feel even worse. Then, without warning, he said the words that shattered everything. She's the one for me, he admitted, his voice quiet but firm. Laura and we both married the wrong people. After all these years, after everything, we finally found each other. We're soulmates. I stared at him, unable to process what I had just heard. Soulmates? Destiny? What was this, some kind of romantic poem? It was like I didn't even know the man standing in front of me. What are you, a poet now? I snapped, disbelief and hurt washing over me. I couldn't believe he was saying these things so casually, like it was all part of some love story I was supposed to understand. But I didn't understand. I couldn't. After years of marriage, years of trust, he was telling me that it had all been a lie, that his heart had belonged to someone else the whole time. And worse, that someone was my best friend. At that moment, the reality of it all hit me. There was no fixing this, no going back. The person I thought I knew, the life I thought I had, was gone. And as I stood there, holding that photo album, I realized that the real drama wasn't in the German soap operas I watched on TV, it was happening in my own life. I was completely speechless. One moment, my husband was confessing to an affair with Laura, and the next he was talking about soulmates and spirituality, as if he'd suddenly transformed into some kind of spiritual guru. I know I made a mistake marrying you, he began. Our soul vibrations are different. We can't be happy together. This is all a test of fate for me and Laura. I just stared at him, my mind struggling to keep up. What on earth was he talking about? He had gone completely off the deep end, into some other dimension I couldn't reach. You and I were not connected on a spiritual level, he continued, looking at me like he was doing me some kind of favor by explaining. I hope you understand. Understand? I didn't understand anything. I had no idea what soul vibrations meant or what kind of test of fate he was talking about. What I did understand was that my husband and my best friend had betrayed me. That much was clear. But strangely, I couldn't even cry. I felt numb. In my mind, I was already giving him up to Laura. If they wanted to be together, fine. He wasn't exactly the greatest husband, and frankly, they probably deserved each other. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, cutting through his spiritual nonsense. Except for the fact that you're speaking English. He looked a little stunned, but I wasn't done. Honestly, I don't think you and I are compatible either. I always knew you were a bit crazy, but this? I don't understand any of it. My husband sighed, like he had been expecting this response. So, if you feel that way, you'll agree to divorce me peacefully, right? I want to be with Laura. I saw where this was heading. He wanted out clean and simple.
No més, no conseqüències.
But I wasn't about to let him off that easy. Oh, I see, I said, playing along. So, no alimony then, huh? He looked confused for a second, like he didn't understand what I was getting at.
What?
I mean, no, that's not what I cut him off, my voice flat and emotionless. I'm sorry, I must not be spiritually tuned in. I can't hear you anymore, whereas just a minute ago I could. My husband blinked, trying to process my sarcastic reply.
What?
Amy, what are you talking about? I had given him a ridiculous answer to his ridiculous request, and now he was the one who was confused. But I didn't care. I stayed silent, completely ignoring him as I walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower. I could hear him shouting behind me. Amy, what kind of person just walks away in the middle of an important conversation? I'll never be free unless you agree to divorce me. But I wasn't listening. In my mind, I was already free. From that moment on, he was nothing more than a speck of dust, as worthless as mold in the corner of a bathtub. He meant nothing to me anymore. I had made up my mind. I would do what I wanted, and he could be with Laura if that's what he wanted. The next morning, he left for work in a foul mood. He didn't even bother to say goodbye, and I didn't either. I didn't make his coffee, I didn't pack his lunch, and I definitely didn't help him find his tie like I used to. It was my day off from being a wife. I got out of bed just in time to watch him leave. Well, that's it, I thought. I guess I'm living alone from today onward. With that in mind, I decided to tidy up my space and make the house feel more like mine. That evening, when he came home, I didn't greet him at the door. I heard him call out, "I'm home," from the front porch, but I didn't answer. He walked in and suddenly I heard him shout, "Hey, where are all my shoes?" I smirked to myself. I had thrown them out earlier. He stormed through the house, calling my name. "Amy, where are you? Why did you throw away my shoes?" I was sitting at the dining table, calmly eating an expensive steak, sipping champagne. He burst into the room, shocked to see me enjoying dinner without him. "Why are you eating without me?" he asked, his voice rising with frustration. I barely looked up. "Because I live here alone now," I said flatly, taking another bite of my steak. "It's normal to eat alone when you live alone." His mouth hung open in disbelief, and I just smiled as I poured myself another glass of champagne. "I've saved up plenty of money," I said, waving a hand toward my meal. "So, I'm enjoying the finer things now. Expensive steak, fine champagne, this is my life from now on." And with that, I went back to my dinner, leaving him standing there, speechless and lost. It was the first time in years I had felt truly free. I didn't even bother making eye contact with my husband. I just kept my eyes glued to the TV, laughing at whatever was on, while enjoying my dinner. I could feel him staring at me, frustrated. "Amy, are you even listening to me?" he snapped. I casually poured myself another glass of champagne, acting like he wasn't even there. I could hear the irritation in his voice, but it only made me more amused. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. "We'll talk after I get out of the shower, okay?" I watched him head upstairs to grab his pajamas. A few minutes later, I heard a loud thud and clattering from the staircase. I didn't even flinch, still focused on my food. Moments later, he was back downstairs, his voice full of disbelief. "Amy, why is there nothing in my room? Where are my pajamas?" he shouted. Without even looking at him, I replied calmly, "I live alone." He stood there, completely baffled. "What is wrong with you? I can't even take a bath. Are you saying I don't need clothes now?" I smirked to myself, but didn't respond. I just finished my meal, still ignoring him, and got up from the table. My husband, clearly confused, followed me around the house. "Where's my food?" he demanded. I turned to him, finally making eye contact. "Go buy your own food. How many times do I have to tell you? I live alone now." I walked straight to the bedroom without another word. I had already taken my bath earlier and, as a little side note, I'd even thrown away his toothbrush. I couldn't wait to see how he would manage the next morning without it. When I woke up the next day, I saw him sitting in a chair, deep in thought, like a statue, just like Rodin's The Thinker. His hair was a mess, sticky and unwashed from the night before. His thinning hair only made his scalp more noticeable, which gave me a small, cruel sense of satisfaction. The moment he noticed I was awake, he rushed over and knelt down in front of me, desperately trying to compose himself. "Amy, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I've been a terrible husband. I've hurt you over and over, without even realizing how much. I know I've done awful things. Please forgive me." I blinked in disbelief. I hadn't expected him to go this far. He was practically begging for forgiveness. He continued, his voice full of desperation. "I want us to start over. I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes." I was stunned. For a second, I didn't say a word. Instead, I just gave him the most disgusted look I could manage.
No. No.
"No," I finally said, shaking my head. "There's no way I can live with this spiritually cheating, emotionally unstable guy." His face twisted in shock. He hadn't expected that reaction. "You don't like it?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Can't you at least think about what I've done for you?" I raised an eyebrow, astonished that he could even ask such a thing. "You're kidding, right? After everything you've done, do you really expect me to just forgive you?"
He kept begging.
"Please, Amy, say something. I'll do whatever you want. Just give me a chance." I knew this game. This was his usual tactic whenever we fought. He'd act like he was willing to do anything, offer to buy me something expensive like a purse, and that would be his way of fixing things. But this time, I wasn't playing along. I knew if I kept quiet long enough, he'd pull out his usual bargaining tricks. So I looked him in the eye and said calmly, "Okay then. Do exactly what I say." His face brightened slightly, but only for a moment. I finally smiled, the words I'd been waiting to say ready to spill out.
"Leave."
"That's what I want." The look of despair that washed over his face was exactly what I'd been hoping for. He was crushed, his mouth hanging open like a monk's silent cry. It felt strangely satisfying to see him in this state.
No. Esta mered.
"That's not what I meant. You can't be serious."
He stayed firm.
"I'm very serious. I have no intention of accepting anything else. You think you can get away with cheating, lying, and betraying me for all these years? Do you really believe that?" My husband was silent, his face pale. For the first time, he realized that he wasn't going to talk his way out of this one. I stood up, grabbed my glass of champagne, and walked away, leaving him on his knees, alone with his thoughts. For once, I felt like I was in control, and it felt good. "I'm going to take everything from both of you," I said calmly. "Otherwise, I will do everything in my power to make sure you regret it." My husband saw the serious look in my eyes and hesitated. "Okay," he muttered. I smiled. "I will be asking for compensation from both you and Laura for what you've done. And I'll be telling her ex-husband everything, too. You'll both probably end up paying alimony. Good luck with that." "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. I stood up. "Come on, get your stuff," I said, pushing him to gather his things. "Grab your work stuff and let's go." I forced him to pick up his bags and dragged him toward the front door. "Where are you taking me?" he asked, still in shock. "Outside," I replied. "I'm keeping this house, so it's mine now. It's not right to have strangers in my house." "Wait," he pleaded. "Can't you at least wait until after the divorce?" "That's not going to happen," I said, shaking my head. "Why not?" "What the hell, Amy? You were quiet for so long, and now suddenly you're cold and heartless. Shut up and get out," I snapped, pushing him out the door with all the strength I had. Years of anger and stress had built up inside me, and at that moment it all came pouring out. I guess sometimes you really do build up negative energy. Before the divorce papers were served, we all sat down to talk, my husband, Laura, her ex-husband, and me. Laura admitted that she had fallen in love with my husband at our wedding. She had approached him shortly after, and that's when their affair started. They kept their relationship secret, planning to wait until both of them were divorced so they could be together. They had been cheating on both families. When Laura's ex-husband found out, he was devastated. But honestly, when I heard all of this, I didn't feel much. If anything, I was grateful because I could use all the facts as proof when asking for alimony. After being kicked out of her house, my husband moved in with Laura. But when she received alimony demands from both me and her ex-husband, reality hit her hard. She realized, we can't get married if we're both in debt. She dumped my husband and kicked him out of her apartment. I couldn't help but laugh. Wasn't she your soulmate? The one who was spiritually connected to you? And now you're losing her over money? Needless to say, I was disgusted by the whole situation. This is what you get for betraying your wife, I thought to myself. 5 years have passed since then. My ex-husband is still paying alimony, but he had to retire early and ended up using most of his retirement money for it. He's barely making ends meet. As for Laura, she's deep in debt, and there's no chance she'll find a man who would marry her now. He hasn't changed much. It seems Laura is working in a tough job now, especially since she's used up her savings paying alimony. As for me, I've received a good amount of money, but I don't do anything special except focus on my work. Life is unpredictable, so I'm just trying to live simply and do what makes me happy. Like they say, if you're ready for anything, you're ready for everything. I spend my days looking forward to watching German soap operas, which I enjoy every day. Recently, I met someone at work who loves them as much as I do. We're even talking about going to Germany together one day, and I'm really looking forward to that. Of course, I won't be checking if our soul vibrations are compatible. I just want to live a peaceful, happy life. My main goal now is simple: to live happier each day.